Well, what's up, guys? Ben here, bringing you another video. Today, we're going to talk about the first Challengers Cup going on across the many different regions of the Challengers landscape. This is usually a big moment in the Call of Duty calendar. We can really see some of these top amateurs play, see how some of these maps play with a little bit slower pacing of a real, actual competitive match. Let's talk about the format, why this tournament is important, and who some of the top teams are looking for the title after this weekend. Let's dive in. All right, so let's talk about what these cups are for people that are maybe newer to Call of Duty or haven't yet paid attention before to sort of how Challengers in the amateur world works. So they have these things as sort of the base of the Challenger sort of ecosystem, these things called Challengers Cups. They run them in a bunch of different regions. There's always one cup in North America, EU, LATAM, and APAC. And as you can see here, and I'm using a pretty helpful sort of master doc that exists out in the Challengers world. This year we have 12 cups in the Challengers landscape. So there's a lot of different Challengers activity. Like, we're not going to talk about Challengers Elite in this video necessarily, but there's always sort of something going on in Challengers every week. But what's super important this year are the first two cups, the one that's this weekend and the one that is next weekend. And the reason for this is those two cups are going to determine the teams that will qualify into the Challengers Major 1 regional qualifiers. So if you see here, the top 16 teams from North America and Europe, as well as the top 8 teams in LATAM and APAC, through those first two cups, will then qualify to a regional qualifier that will determine teams that will make it to the Wednesday before Major 1 play-in tournament to determine the 4 teams that will make it to that group stage at Major 1. So for the Challengers teams doing well in this tournament, you don't have to win them necessarily, but you got to play well enough to really make it to Sunday of the tournament. You have an opportunity to then play in that qualifier. And then if you do well in your regional qualifier, you'll then get to the play-in. You do well in the play-in that Wednesday before the event, then you're in group play the next day, playing pro teams and getting a shot at really breaking it into the pro scene. So super important. As for the format of the cups and like how they work, so it's like any other game battles tournament, right? So for example, I'm flicking over here and showing you how the EU Challengers Cup looks on the Game Battles website. It's free to enter. So if you're just anyone you want to play, you can hop on as long as you're eligible in that region. You know, like any other game battles tournament, you enter, get your teammates in there, you're locked in, you get a bracket, bada bing, bada boom. Obviously, it's not generated here in EU. The way the tournament works, and they've changed this format a couple of times over the years. The predecessor to these cups was the old sort of 2K, 5Ks, if y'all remember those from like AW and Ghost. When pro teams used to play in these, they were just a straight single limb, open bracket, and you'd play to the end and someone would win. They've changed the format in recent years. Basically, it's still kind of a single limb bracket up until you get to top 8, and then they take everybody and put them in a double elimination bracket. So it's a little bit more fairer for the teams that get towards the end of the tournament. It makes it a little bit more exciting as you kind of get rid of all sort of the open sort of mid AM, low AM teams, and you kind of get to the top AMs. You get this really cool kind of double M bracket format. So that is how it works. Again, we have a cup this weekend, November 12th to 13th. There's another cup on November 19th to the 20th, and you see that the Pro Am qualifiers, at least per this doc, and I don't know if this is correct or not, are scheduled for December 3rd. So these two cups are really important. It'll determine who's going to play on the 3rd, and then if you do well on the 3rd, then you'll have that opportunity to play into the Pro Am when you get to Raleigh. So exciting stuff. Let's talk about some of the top teams. So for the purpose of this video, I'm only going to focus on EU and NA. There are some really good teams in APAC, in LATAM, but I just don't have enough time in this video to cover those. And I think once we kind of see which teams qualify into the play-in bracket, we'll do a further sort of video breaking down those teams that make it into that Wednesday tournament. So starting with EU, there are probably a couple of names here that are really familiar if you watched a lot of Call of Duty in the last few years, at least at the amateur level. And there are some ex-pros in here that kind of were real quality players back during the CWL era. So let me highlight a few teams for you here. So the team that's got the most pro points in EU, and I think globally actually might have the most pro points, is Team Maple. That's Maple, Conman, Furious, and Eric Boom. Kind of a fun mixed teams, players that have been around the amateur scene for a while. They don't have super high sort of NA international land placements. These guys have always been pretty quality online, so we'll see what they can do in this tournament. Elevate, if y'all remember them from the early years of Call of Duty, and they've obviously been involved in other esports as well. They're sponsoring an amateur team now. This is Sleeb, Vortex, Gizmo, and Harry. So Gizmo and Harry obviously featured for London this season. Vortex has been around for a long time, playing a lot in the CWL era, if you remember. This is a really a team probably with the most sort of CDL experience on it. And I'm expecting to do well in EU and probably be one of the favorites to sort of make it to that play-in tournament. You've got Team Journey, playing alongside a bunch of players from Spain. Curious to see how Juan's team does. I'm a big Journey fan. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because I've been solid friends with Juan for a minute. Been waiting for him to kind of break out on the pro side. He did obviously feature for Atlanta FaZe Academy in the early years of CWL. But he always does well in the beginning of these tournaments, so let's see how his squad does. A couple other squads I am looking forward to. Team Chax. Chax, Davey, Grad, and Rafi. Interesting squad. Dave is probably a name that you may be most familiar with. He was a really top AR back during the end of the Jetpack era of Call of Duty. Hasn't really featured at the top level of the pro scene since, but has been a mainstay in challengers. Curious to see what he does. I believe he took some time off last year, so let's see what he does coming back now. And another team, if you're familiar with EU challengers, and these players kind of feature a lot when you look at top 4, top 5 teams in this region every year, you've got the Mad Villains. So it's Nile, Defrag, Detain, and B Mythics. Again, players that have been around for a minute, have always been kind of on those top EU teams. Not a whole lot of amazing international land success, but as far as this region goes, they're always sort of in the mix with those squads. So yeah, those are a couple of teams to look at in EU, but I will say this, guys, one thing that always happens in these first couple of cups, especially in challengers, is you're not really sure if any teams are going to kind of break through and sort of get these upsets. There's always a couple of teams in the top 4, top 6 that are surprises. Sometimes they get accused of cheating unfairly. So there may be a couple of teams in here that are like dark sleepers that may end up placing well in this tournament. So we'll break that down on Monday in a recap video. But I wanted to highlight a couple of teams that may be familiar to you if you've been around for a minute. I think one team, by the way, one team that I missed when I was doing this and now looking at it, I'm surprised I mentioned it, is Brezzy's team. I may have missed it because this is kind of listed by GB username. So I didn't really notice where Azuba's username was here on here, and I'm gonna butcher this team name again for the 59th time doing one of these videos. Awababobs. If y'all own this org or you know this org and I butcher the name of this team, please let me know. But this Brezzy team was really good at the next Breaking Point tournament. Obviously, Zuba is someone who has a lot of momentum coming in. So I'm curious to see how they do in this tournament. But anyway, here are some quality squads to look out for when this tournament starts tomorrow morning. Let's talk NA, and a lot of really big names in here again. If you are a normal follower of challengers, you're going to see a lot of names in the players that you may know, and I think more so this year. Look at the coaching staffs of some of these teams and some of the ex-pros that are featuring some really interesting like coaching names. You've obviously got Parasite coming in, and he's actually coaching the Decimate team now. He's not actually coaching them this weekend. He's filling in for London Academy, and we'll get to that in a minute. You've got Silly, Nagafin also coaching teams in challengers now, as well as Josh. So a lot of like ex-pros now getting involved with coaching amateurs, which I think is pretty cool, and you love to see people starting to build that resume. So let's talk about some squads that I think have a chance to win this, and some sort of dark horses who might pull it off. With the number 1 amount of pro points in NA, you got Toronto Ultra Academy. This is Day Patty, Capsule, Gravity, and Hixie. So it's the Ultra Academy NA team with Hixie on it. Obviously, we know what Gravity can do, and he played phenomenal in the Breaking Point next tournament last weekend. Obviously, you know, Cap really took the league by storm last season, but this sort of faded near the middle of the year, I think due to some sort of team issues. This year is a really big chance for him to work on some of his soft skills and really get back into the pro world. And obviously we know what Day Patty can do. So a lot of experience on the squad, a lot of ARs actually, but it is an AR heavy game right now. And I think they fit nicely in getting a solid top 4, maybe winning this tournament. Next up, we got Team Mohawk. That's Mohawk Classic, Johnny, and Saints. Just a quick recap. If you don't know who Saints Nato is, has been around for a long time. Obviously, if you all know Zuma, that was like one of his OG duos back in Denial, back in Ghost. Saints has won on a bunch of different titles back on the pro side. He took a break last season, working on some life stuff, but he is back. Nato is an active slayer. If he can get back to that level that he was at before he took a break, like Nato is definitely going to be one of the top subs in challengers if he can also maybe break into the pro level. We've also got Johnny, who's played really well at the challengers level. And then next up, you have a bunch of players on here who were on CDL rosters over the last couple of years. Johnny obviously played for Paris last season. Nick Classic's been around for a minute, man. He's done it all other than win a COD Champs chip. He is in challengers right now, but is Atlanta Phases sub. And you've got Money Mo coming in with the most pro points in NA. Again, another team with a lot of heavy hitters. Expect them to do well in this tournament. Next up, you got LAG Academy, and this team got announced officially yesterday with a really cool announcement video from the LAG team. Shout out them. You've got Assault, Diamond Con, Exceed, and Joe Deceive. So some interesting talent on this team. Obviously, Assault has been around for a minute and has a COD Champs ring. Diamond Con most recently at the pro level featured for New York, but it's been in challengers for about a year or so now. Exceed has been around for a minute, had a look in the CDL early on. on, but is looking to get back to that level. And Joe DeCease has a lot of hype coming in, played well at Breaking Point Next last weekend. He's going to probably be Los Angeles Guerrillas sub. And, you know, to the chagrin, I think, of a lot of top AMs, is kind of coming in as that U18, former U18 player. He's not eligible to play in these tournaments, and coming as sort of a guy with a lot of hype. And we'll see if he maybe cracks it at the pro level very quickly here. We have a lot of other squads below that. Obviously, you've got the Mock, Hollow, Turiel, Yuli team. So if you follow a lot of challengers, Mock and Hollow have been around for a minute and usually feature on those top 4, top 6 teams. And Turiel played for Florida last season. Rocker Academy is an interesting squad. So you got Fame and Real kind of playing from Minnesota and really going through the development pipeline with that team. And they're pairing up with GodRx and Pander, both players that have featured at the CDL level in the first year of the league, but have been grinding through challengers ever since and are usually on top teams. So be on the lookout for this squad. You've got Doug's team over at Boston Academy. He is teaming this year with Kremp, Shawnee, and Beans. Kind of an interesting squad. Honestly, from what I have heard about this team in scrims, like they've been sort of up and down. So I'm curious to see if they may be one of your upset potential teams that maybe don't make it to the top 8 bracket, but Doug usually finds a way to get it done. So I'm curious to see what happens. And obviously Beans has a lot of hype behind him as Boston sub. You got Iron Blood Gaming. I was watching them yesterday. They were streaming Optic on, they were streaming scrims against Optic. Dan Gosi, Persini, Pentagram, and Gunless. So Gunless, obviously well-known CDL pro. Persini's obviously been around there as well, winning chips. And Pentagram and Dan Gosi have been top challengers players for a minute. And then some interesting squads below that I just want to highlight. Obviously, Chino is back grinding. And interestingly enough, Chance Mox has come back over from Halo to compete in challengers. And they are teaming with Noisy and Wardy. So Wardy obviously involved in the New York organization. So interesting team, might be able to get something done. Bello's obviously grinding challengers once again this year. He's teaming with Royalty, who's been around for a minute. Geo and Darkside, interesting Dark Horse squad, coached by Nagafin. Obviously, I got to highlight the Timmy Fandom's team. They've always been a pretty solid squad in challengers, usually winning an elite or two. And that squad is Tim, John, Dylan Rex, and Yeez. There's some interesting CDL-ish level talent on that squad. And a couple of more teams. I want to highlight 3 kind of dark horse teams in terms of pro points. You've got Exotic's team. So Exotic's been around for a minute and very much was a pro at the CWL level. He's teaming with Jintroid, who's been the AM for a minute. Fire, who obviously featured for a minute on Paris Legion and Estriel. Jimbo, fresh off of his stint with the Paris Legion, is in challengers this year. And he's teaming with Archives, Zyral, and Ramby. So a bunch of players on this squad that have, again, another one of those challengers mainstays. Not a lot of new challengers players, but they've been around for a minute and been on solid squads. So I'm curious to see if they are potentially a team that can really crack a top 8 here and get some good pro points. And finally, one more squad I want to highlight is London Academy, and it's Hamza, Venom, Decimate, and I believe Scraps is supposed to be on this team, but because he is currently in Europe kind of finalizing his visa situation, I think he's moving over next week to NA. Parasite is subbing in for that team just for this cup. This could be a team to watch in the second cup once Maddie gets over here, because I think Maddie's like a game changer player. I'm not discounting Haggy because, you know, Chris always plays well in these tournaments. I'm very curious to see how this team does. They're coming in with the 15th seed, so cracking top 8 means they're gonna have to play probably another really good team, but one of a really good solid candidate to potentially go deep in this tournament. And look, there are a bunch of other teams I can talk about. Kaiser's team, Emery's and Cade, those guys have been around for a minute. And there's always 1 or 2 names or squads that people don't necessarily talk about from, like, you know, seeds 20 through 30 that maybe also kind of crack it in the top. We'll see what happens over the weekend and who kind of rounds out the top 8 that we see play on Sunday. But yeah, that's basically it for this video. Wanted to highlight a lot of sort of how this works, top players, top teams. I'll be putting out some sort of reactionary content over the weekend as the tournament unfolds. And then on Monday, I'll put out a video sort of recapping my thoughts on how the tournament went and what my takeaways are. To be on the lookout for that. As always, guys, let me know in the comments if I missed any players or teams that I should have highlighted, and we'll talk about them in the comments with y'all. Like the video if you enjoyed the content, subscribe for more. Really excited for things to start kicking up now. As always, guys, we'll see you in the next video.